but she's an author of several books and an internationally recognized authority. She's been practicing clinical psychologist in the DC metropolitan area since 1977. She's been affiliated with Montgomery County Public Schools as an administrative psychologist, developing the programs for compliance. Her practice in Alexandria included developing programs for psychological services for the courts, the correctional center, as well as families and individuals in her office. In DC, she was team psychologist on an interdisciplinary clinical team that evaluated and treated children and their families, children who have special needs, youngsters in the juvenile justice systems, and adults and geriatric patients. Sounds like quite a bit. She's been a member of the faculty and a senior research fellow at GW, Howard, George Mason, and several universities abroad. Her publications include 6 books, many book chapters, and professional and mainstream publications. I think I better just skip down. Against Violence Against Women is a journey through time and across the globe to bring to light the roots of sanctioned violence against women. She utilizes an interdisciplinary approach. And I think I will let it go there. Here's a copy of the book. And here is Dr. Fields.
Thank you for the wonderful introduction. I have to add to it that Elaine Newman and I go way back, and one of the ways that we met, besides women's issues at the Women's National Democratic Club, was that Elaine's husband, late husband, Lynn Newman, and her daughter-in-law, Chris Owens, were the only good lawyers I had in my long struggle against academic discrimination against women. And I just had so much regard for them and the job they did, so much more so because I went through so many really awful lawyers and so many awful things. But Lynn and Chris were just magnificent, and I just, my recollection of them and my tribute to them is lifelong. As long as I'm alive, I will be. Okay.
Do you want water?
Oh, thank you.
I'll get something to put it
It'll be awkward to get it into there, so
Yeah.
maybe if it's on the table, that'll be better. But anyway, the book will be showing pictures as I go along. Pictures won't always coordinate with what I'm saying because it's a global story, it's a historical story, and it's a theoretical proposition. To make a long argument very short, when I started thinking about femicide, which is genocide of women, I realized that the only thing that could stop this, just like discrimination against women, was not just a law, but an enforcement agency. And the subtitle is The Case for Gender Protection. And gender protection has been used in the past to encage women. We're protecting you. We're going to put you in this cage. But gender protection, in the sense of genocide, and if we look at the genocide conventions, means that there is a law against destroying creatures because they're female, going all the way to pre-birth, and after and at birth, and against and providing enforcement of that law. That means it goes to international courts not only when a population of women are gang raped, as happened in Bosnia and it happened in Rwanda and some other places, but when travesties in the execution of the law are prominent, that it can go to an international court. Enough said about the subtitle. I want to explain the icons on the cover and the figure behind me. We'll get back to that. The icons on the cover are explained in the preface to the book, and very briefly they're this. This is Hulda. Hulda is a Palestinian child, a girl child, who I met in Beirut in Sabra Shatila in 1980, late 82, after the massacre. And Hulda was a little 9-year-old then. Reminded me of Trish, who was 9 in 73 when I met her in Northern Ireland. They had some of the same issues. They were girls in a family where only the boys got new clothes, and what was left over was for the daughters, and education, and the cost of education wasn't even left over. So the girls had the poorest kind of education. This is consistent with all of the societies. And Hulda was being my carrier. She was carrying my testing kits. And so my student assistant and I was teaching at AUB, American University of Beirut at the time, took her out to where the shopping carts were, piled high with clothes and goodies, and told her to pick out a dress. She had never had anything bought for her. Just leftovers. And she picked out this denim skirt. And I said, but Hulda, this is much too big for you. And she said, but Dr. Rona, I have to cover my knees. I can't show my legs. And I said, but you're 9 years old. And she said, yes, but I'm a girl. And I thought of Trish in Northern Ireland. It goes on and on and on that way. Things remind me of other things. And this is the goddess of compassion. And I found her in an antique shop in Beijing in 1998, I think it was. And my Chinese friend who was with me said, wow. You know, she'd been in the United States. She said, wow, you have to look at this. And I did. And I said, yeah, quite beautiful. She's really quite beautiful. But why? And then Shu Hong told me, all of the goddesses of compassion were ordered during the Cultural Revolution to be destroyed. And so they went into all of the temples all over and destroyed all of them. You won't find any of the old ones. This one is 400 years old, easily. And why? That was the Cultural Revolution. We're getting rid of all of the symbols of traditional society. Traditional society, women were the givers of compassion. They weren't to be anymore in what was female during the Cultural Revolution, during Maoism, was to be destroyed. Somebody kindly saved her. Her hands were destroyed, and in the back you can see where she was wrenched from the temple, but she wasn't destroyed. So I bought her and I took her home in a garment bag, and I had papers that said she was only 200 years old because you couldn't take anything more than that age out of China. And so I took her home. She's a very important part of my household. And she's somebody I look at every day when I sit down to any meal, and my guests get the pleasure of looking at her as well. Goddess of compassion, who was to be destroyed. This is a sculpture I found in what was Czechoslovakia, and I was doing research on my family, and my family had come from Moravia, my father's family, and I was trying to learn what happened to each of them during the Holocaust and studying the whole thing. So I was there in Brno, where part of the family had lived, and I was going between my hotel and the town hall every day, where I was studying the maps and the changes in the street names and the changes in the buildings from the 1930s to, what was it, 1991, 92. And I passed a gallery. And the gallery was this wonderful sculpture of a young woman, not a vapid virgin type, but a solid, dreaming woman, young woman, with her guitar and thinking wonderful things and showing her strength. And I loved it. But then I got a little bit further on one day, and I saw some men digging. And it turned out, I asked them what they were doing. I'm very nosy. And they said, we're finding an old wall. And I said, oh, the old wall's there. They said, no, this is an old wall. And I said, what do you think was the origin? And they pulled out a couple of articles that they pulled from there and showed it to me. And they said, well, what do you think these are? And I said, oh my God, they're Celt. They're Celtic. I had done a lot of work in Ireland and history and archaeology and anthropology, the whole thing, written books on it. And I knew a Celtic artifact when I saw one. And they said, yes, we think it was also. And later I learned that this area, Moravia, was the place of first settlement of the Celts in Europe. And then I learned a lot more about the Celts, and of course they're in the book. And I had to have her because she so symbolized the kind of woman that is represented in the Celtic culture. So I bought her, and I was on one of these long trips to a lot of different countries. I bought a garment bag, put all my underwear around her to protect her, and carried her overhead compartment. Got her home. And of course she's in my living room where everybody can enjoy her grace and her strength. That's the three icons in here. And of course there's a chapter on the Celts. And I'll tell you a little bit about that as we go along. Because that was the most, in a way, informative and uplifting of all of the chapters that I wrote. Because that was a society in which women were not targets for destruction, but were equal and were warriors, were priests, were kings. We'll talk